I have a wonderful show for you today, a guest that I've wanted to speak with for many months now. We're going to be talking about some of the biggest stories going on in the United States of America right now. Dr. Glenn Loury, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, Stephen, it's good to be with you.
So, just some background for my audience. Professor Glenn Loury is a distinguished economist, author, and social critic known for his incisive analysis of race, inequality, and social policy. In addition to being a writer and professor, he's a highly sought after podcast guest. I feel lucky to have him on today. Professor, the first question I want to go over with you, this was trending on Twitter big time in the last few days. According to the Daily Mail, half of trainee doctors at UCLA's prestigious medical school are failing basic tests after the dean, who is an anti-white, ignored affirmative action bans and terrorized the staff with DEI rules. Now, I know you're not a big fan of affirmative action based on past interviews you've given. However, this is concerning to me when UCLA is blocking students with white skin from joining their medical doctor program, and now half of their students can't even pass basic tests in college. What are your thoughts on this story?
Well, let me just ask you, because I haven't seen the details on the story. Is it half of all UCLA students, most of whom I assume would not be Black, or is it half of the minority students who are not able to pass the test?
I believe it's half of all the students, not just minority.
Okay, so you're right. I'm not a big fan of affirmative action. I'm not a colorblind zealot, but on the other hand, I think we're a half century down the road on this, and we need to find a better way forward. We're a multi-ethnic country. The situation of the Asians in that case, Harvard and the University of North Carolina, was outrageous, in my opinion, them being discriminated against and all of that. And white people being discriminated against is not a good thing. It's discrimination, just like as if you were discriminating against so-called people of color. So I'm with you on that. I think you might want to ask the question here about, have they dumbed down the standards in order to accommodate a less distinguished student body? If they lower the bar in order to admit minority kids in the admissions process, then they have to do something in the classroom as well. And the thing about that is what they do in the classroom affects everybody, not just the kids who are let in with a lower test score. So maybe we're seeing the results of a generalized reduction in standards characteristic of medical education at UCLA. But I don't know, those are some thoughts that come to mind.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Speaking of college campuses, the last 30 days, it seems like out of nowhere, we saw these massive protests, pro-Palestine, anti-Israel Gaza war situation. But then many of the students have been shocked by having consequences. And at the same time, during their graduation ceremony, if they were allowed to, they're ripping up their doctorates, they're ripping up their bachelor degrees. It seems like there is a feeling of anti-America, anti-university within the university system. What were your thoughts on these protests?
Well, I'll be honest with you. It reminded me of Occupy Wall Street. I'm kind of old over here. I've been around for a while. You know, going back to the financial crisis and whatnot, and in the general upsurge against the system, against the authority, against conventionality, and the sense that the game is rigged, the capitalists are winning, or something. That was Occupy Wall Street. It reminded me of the post George Floyd, the summer of 2020, where we had all these riots and these very destructive public reactions to a perceived incident of injury or moral affront. But when you scratch the surface and you looked underneath it, it was not anything like what the protesters said that they were protesting against. This, it seems to me, is two things. One of them is the war, Gaza, Israel, Hamas. The other is what's going on in our elite academic institutions more broadly, and diversity, equity, and inclusion would be a part of that. And the political correctness of the way in which the curriculum and the teaching and the political ethos, the shutting down of heterodox views, the very few conservatives that are present in academia, the culture of academia. So I'm seeing a collision between the culture of academia, which has its corrupt side to it. Yes, it's anti-American. They think American empire is evil and bad. I want to know what country and what world they want to live in. They want to live in a world where there's another empire that is animated by other principles. They think capitalism is bad. I say, okay, but how did you get rich? Why is it that we live amidst plenty? Where do you think that came from? How do you think the Chinese are able to feed their people without markets and capitalism and trade and profit and corporations and law? So there's a corruption in the intellectual environment, catering to student identity. Adoption of all of these various trendy enthusiasms. I'm talking about sexual, gendered stuff and whatnot. Again, I'll get into trouble if I go further on this. It'll reveal me as a conservative. The subtitle of my book is Confessions of a Black Conservative. It'll reveal me as a conservative, but I think there's a problem in academia. And then it hits this thing, which is this war, and this war is horrible, man. And I mean, come on, this is horrible stuff. I mean, whatever side, I'm not on the side of the Hamas. I want to be clear about that. On the other hand, this problem in Gaza is a very deep historical problem, and this war is horrible. So kids are seeing this and they're embracing it as a catalyst or a vehicle to express certain enthusiasms and certain alienations and whatnot. And the institutions themselves they don't have the robustness and clarity of principle to be able to stand against it. And we're getting the situation that we get. That's my armchair analysis, Stephen. I don't know what you think of it.
Yeah, no, it's pretty well in line with what I've said to my community, which is I believe Israel has the right to defend itself. I also hate how they're going about it. I believe Hamas needs to be taken out, but I believe Hamas is winning the PR war. And so the whole thing is ugly. It's been very difficult for me to cover the Israel-Gaza situation. It's been very difficult to cover the Ukraine-Russia situation because I'm anti-war. I'm anti-death. I don't like any of this, and yet, it's been a tough one to navigate as somebody with a large public audience. I'm sure you saw this. President Biden is invited to speak at Morehouse, and during his speech, he essentially tells all of these incredible Black American men and women that they live in a country where they will be victimized, where they are second class, where they will likely be killed, and that even though they love their country does not love them back. I'm not sure what to make of this. To me, it seemed like a very pessimistic, anti-American, trying to build a better country for everybody speech. What were your thoughts on Biden's speech at Morehouse College?
It was terrible, and it infuriated me. That speech was an offense against both the great accomplishment, which is the success of the civil rights movement, and the redress that has happened to the historical fact of Black subordination and discrimination and whatnot. Of course, that was true. And we got past it. And people bled and died in order to get past it. It was manipulative, and it talked down to Black people. It thinks we're children. The people who wrote that speech think that Black Americans are fools. They think that we are going to be led around by the nose by waving a bloody shirt that the Ku Klux Klan is coming to get us. This is America in the year 2024. We're in the year 2024. The country has completely changed from the era that Joe Biden is trying to invoke, and the historical era that he's trying to get Black people to live in. It's completely changed since then. Has anybody noticed? Scores of millions of immigrants have come. We're in the 21st century. China. Have you heard of China? Technology, the internet, AI. The world is moving fast. It's getting small. You're still living in these fantasies, and you want Black people to live here. Let me be plain about it. Black people need to develop our capacities to perform in the greatest, richest, and freest country that has ever existed in the history of humankind. We need to get with it. The train is leaving the station. Those young men needed to be told that they stand on the threshold of greatness, that they are equipped to fulfill the dreams of their ancestors, that they live within a society and an order that offers them what has seldom been offered to any people who have walked on this planet: unlimited potential. Instead, this guy, I'm sorry, I'm not going to vote for Joe Biden. I'll just tell you, I'm not going to tell you who I'm going to vote for, but I'll tell you who I'm not going to vote. You think I'm going to vote for that? This guy, white supremacy is coming to get you. Our democracy. And Black people, we don't fit in. We're the caboose. We're at the back of the train. We're the ones with our noses pressed against the candy store window. We're the ones always trying to get in. Well, we're already in. We are the richest and most powerful large population of African descent on the planet. There are Black billionaires. Everything is possible here. So I despise that speech and the political philosophy from which it issued, treating Black people like children.
Yeah, it felt like attempting to poison their mind. I was fortunate to meet and speak with the speechwriter for Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan. I asked him about that speech, and he said, "I don't believe Biden wrote that. I believe a bitter American wrote that." And they were trying to get sound bites in order to make Biden more relatable and popular. And I thought, how would that make you more relatable and popular? None of it made any sense to me.
Yeah. Well, I told you what I thought.
Yeah. All right. You brought up the civil rights movement. President Biden, we're celebrating we're not celebrating. We're just passing the anniversary, the 4-year anniversary of George Floyd. And President Joe Biden said that George Floyd did more for Blacks than Dr. Martin Luther King. I just disagree with that so much. What are your thoughts on Biden's analysis or comments?
Yeah, I thought the quote was something like his death had a bigger impact than King's or something like that. But in any case,
like
it's the same spirit. Well, I mean, I can just reiterate what I was saying before. I despise that kind of talk. I mean, George Floyd is a saint in some quarters, and if I say anything ill of him, I will just ruin my standing with certain people. But the fact of the matter is, he did not live an admirable life. He was a miscreant. He was not something that you would want your children to aspire to. He's been martyred by circumstance. He happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, or the right place at the right time, depending on how you look at it. And so he became this iconic symbol of something. That symbol has everything to do with us and very little to do with George Floyd. The fact that the president of the United States would point to this guy, and I'm not going to go into the details, these things are publicly known. Everybody can watch the video of his arrest. Would hold him up as some kind of admirable figure, shows contempt for Black people. If I were to say Joe Biden shows himself to be a racist by touting the historical symbolic significance of George Floyd, I think I'd have grounds for doing so. So, and by the way, Martin Luther King was every American's saint. He doesn't just belong to Black America. King Day is not just about Black America. King helped to lead the country to a recognition of the inadequacy of its institutions relative to its promise in the founding and its ideals. He helped to resolve that for everybody. So on that count too, I would fault Joe Biden's invocation of George Floyd in comparison of him to Martin Luther King. How dare he?
Yeah. You're you're known for being well versed in economic topics. You've already mentioned that you're not going to be voting for Joe Biden, but there's this idea of Bidenomics, making life better for every American, whether they voted for him or not. He's every American's president, right? And there's two messages that are screaming very loudly. You have the White House telling people we've done more for jobs, we've done more for people's income, life is getting better. You have a better career because of us. At the same time, you have people's wallets screaming out to them, life is more expensive under Biden. The cost of everything has gone up under Biden. I don't have excess money every month, like the White House tells me. Is this the White House using 1984 principles to tell us to ignore our ears and our eyes and just believe that everything's better because they need their political war machine to reelect this man?
In a word, yeah, in my opinion. I mean, first of all, we hear this every year, and we hear it from both parties. The activities of the Congress and of the executive passing legislation and enacting programs are the determinants of our well-being. And we look at the tick this way or that, and then we try to take credit or assign blame and try to win an election. When in fact, it's much more complicated and subtle than that. I mean, Bidenomics, what is it? Well, it's an Inflation Reduction Act, really, which is basically a huge expansion of federal programs for climate action and things of this kind. Or it's the infrastructure, or it's the assistance to people in the pandemic when they flood the economy with money, and then wonder in surprise about why we have inflation. So I don't know that Bidenomics is anything except an effort of the campaign advertising department to put a brand on something that they then want to try to sell to the American people as a vision for the country. I'm not impressed.
Yeah, I'm not either. Okay, you have a book that is recently out called Late Admissions: Confessions of a Black Conservative. Tell my audience about that book. What are we going to learn? Why did you write it?
Oh, I could take all day doing that, Stephen. Okay, so it's a memoir. Late admissions, you get it. I'm a professor. They have admissions in college. I'm a late admitter because I'm in my 70s. That's late in life. Confessions of a Black Conservative. So I've said I'm admitting, so confessions is clear enough. Black Conservative, well, you should know that by now if you've been listening to this interview. And it's a story of me coming up in Chicago on the South Side in a working class family of African Americans embedded within the ghetto society of South Side Chicago, born in 1948. And the pathway that I took to becoming a Ivy League professor and a author and a internationally renowned public intellectual. So that's the broad scaffolding. So people might want to know that I was a father at 18 and at 19 and at 21. That I am a born-again Christian who has lapsed in his faith. That I spent 5 months in a halfway house in Irish Boston working class neighborhood as a guest at a halfway house recovering from drug addiction. That I was the first African American tenured member of the economics department at Harvard University. That I was about to be nominated by President Ronald Reagan in his second administration to the position of Undersecretary of Education in the Department of Education in 1987, but had to withdraw because of a scandal that erupted when I got into a fight with my mistress whom I was keeping in an extramarital relationship at the time of this political development, and so on. That I was a Reagan conservative in the 80s, that I broke with my right-wing friends, many of them in the late 1990s and the aughts, and became a crusader against mass incarceration, and that I was radicalized back to Black conservatism by the Black Lives Matter movement and all that happened after Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown and company, where I thought the country or some part of it went crazy, making a mountain out of a molehill. There's no hunting Black people down in the street by rogue racist cops, but there is an issue. There's a serious issue about crime and the behavior in certain parts of our society in which African Americans are implicated and overrepresented amongst people who are behaving in ways that solicit the attention of law enforcement. I'm not saying there's no such thing as police brutality, but I'm saying the magnitude of the relative problem. 10,000 Black homicides a year versus a handful of cases in which unarmed citizens fall prey in altercations that they more likely than not provoked with the police. I mean, I thought the country went crazy. Anyway, I'm saying a lot of different things. I'm not telling a story. My book tells the story from my earliest childhood years on through yesterday.
Interesting. Okay, that sounds like it's going to be you've lived an interesting life.
Thank you.
Yeah. You made me think of something. So during my time on YouTube, I've had the privilege of meeting a lot of people around the country, and I've made friends with a gentleman down in Texas and a woman in Chicago. So I decided to bring them together to have a podcast, and they had a discussion about reparations, criminal justice, who should be president. But in there, they started talking about defunding the police. And the gentleman said, we need to defund the police. They're racially targeting Blacks more than any other group. And she took the opposite side, saying, hey, in Chicago, we need more police to help with gangs and youth and drugs and trafficking of weapons and people. And so anyway, it was an interesting back and forth. I tended to lean with the woman from Chicago that, yes, there's problems within policing, but I don't think having less police around it is the right answer. What are your thoughts on defunding the police and criminal reform?
Yeah, I think defunding is a very bad idea. I'm with the woman from Chicago, although I do not any longer live on the south side of Chicago. I live in Providence, Rhode Island, on the east side in a very leafy green, big houses and lots and swimming pools in the backyards and things like that kind of community. So I'm not dealing with gunshots. I'm not dealing with strangers loitering around the back of my house. I'm not worried about going out at 11 o'clock at night because I need to pick up something from the store. And if I were, I would want to know that the sources of security that we all rely upon, I mean, we all just take for granted the fact that nobody's trying to get into our bedroom window. That's a precious thing. That's an achievement of society. And we are entitled to it in a well-functioning society. And when we don't have it, the government has failed us. So I think there are issues that you could raise about policing, about police culture, about police practice and administration that'll vary from city to city, but that people who say that there could be improvements in the quality and the way in which the services of policing are delivered to the citizens and that there are issues that warrant attention. Okay, how do you train police? Who do you recruit to be police? How do you organize the way in which you deal with the problems that police are asked to confront? I'm okay with people being critical about that kind of thing. But defund the police is not about that. Defund the police is an anti-cop ideology that emerges out of the Black Lives Matter movement, which I think on the whole has been destructive. I mean, I think it's actually demonstrable. People from Heather McDonald with her book, The War on Cops. It's an old book by now, probably almost 10 years old, but going back to 2016, I think. But even Roland Fryer, the economist at Harvard, who's done some studies of policing and crime in African-American communities, the efforts to go after police departments by the federal government, after local departments for being racist and investigating them, have had negative effects on police morale and have indirectly been implicated in increases in crime in certain communities. This is one of Roland Fryer's findings. So I think there's evidence that the antipathy toward policing has been destructive in terms of leading indirectly to less public safety in endangered communities.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Well, Professor, I want to thank you for coming on and having a great discussion. I'm going to put a direct link to your book down below. If people want to follow you online, what's the best way that they can do that?
Oh, they can go to glennloury.substack.com and they can become subscribers for free, or they can become paying subscribers and get extra benefits, but they will have access to my newsletter and my podcast at glennloury.substack.com.
Okay, I'm going to put that down below, as well as a link to late admissions. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks very much, Stephen. I enjoyed it. Bye.